When did Hoka start designing moon boots? Meet the Hoka Skyward X. What's up everybody, I'm Eric McIntyre aka Rad Dad Bod, and you're watching Rad Dad Bod TV, where we review running shoes. Now today we're going to be talking about the Hoka Skyward X, and before we get into the details, if it's your first time watching one of my videos, you may notice that there's some timestamps in the description below. Feel free to jump around and look at any of the aspects of the shoe that I review, but if you do so, I would sure appreciate a like and follow, as well that you come back and watch the full review at some point in the future, because I put a lot of time and effort into making these shoe reviews comprehensive and educational for you. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about some disclaimers and disclosures. I was provided this shoe free of charge through a PR agency associated with Hoka. The purpose of the gift was to review the shoe. That being said, neither the PR agency, Hoka, nor anyone else involved whatsoever gets to see these reviews beforehand, and these thoughts are entirely my own. Now with that out of the way, let's dive into the intended usage of the shoe. The Hoka Skyward X is part of a new wave of max cushion super trainers. These shoes are particularly designed as marathon training companions, specifically for kind of those marathon long runs, to be able to ease some of the pressure on the joints and prevent you from having to use a full carbon fiber plated super shoe on all of your long runs. In theory, this should leave your legs feeling a little bit more fresh to handle the rigors of an overall training block. Now with that in mind, that is how we're going to be evaluating the shoe against its other competitors. From a pricing standpoint, this shoe comes in at a whopping $225, which in my opinion is high, but is unfortunately somewhat typical for this max cushion super trainer range. What you'll find is most of these shoes kind of fit in that $200 to $225 range, so again, I don't think it's incredibly out there compared to the rest of the market, though I do think that the market needs to calm down a little bit. As far as specs go, the shoe comes in at 10.8 ounces, which is heavy overall. As you can see, there's a lot of foam underfoot, so you have a 49mm heel and a 44mm forefoot for a 5mm heel to toe drop. One thing to note in this max cushion super trainer category is many of these shoes would be considered illegal to race in if you were a professional runner. But for training usage, the runners are free to use whatever they want, and obviously as amateurs, middle of the pack, back of the pack runners, we can wear whatever we want in our races. From a fit standpoint, I did have a few issues with the shoe. While the toe box is accommodating and the length of the shoes is true to size, the midfoot tends to fit pretty narrow overall, and there's a very pronounced arch in the shoe. As such, the fit did take some getting used to, but as far as kind of purchasing for yourself, I would not size up or down. I would go with your normal size. Now the upper is a flat knit upper, and it's supposed to be fairly breathable, and I won't say that it's hot by any means, but it's definitely not the most breathable upper I've ever tried on. It is very much a max cushion shoe upper though, so when you think of max cushion shoes, you often think of like really plush, really comfortable overall, just kind of like a pillow for your feet, and again, that is true with this shoe. You've got a pretty pillowy tongue, though not overwhelming as some max cushion shoes have, and you've got some really good cushion here in kind of the ankle collar, which forms a really nice heel cup, as well as kind of this plasticky or maybe a TPU overlay heel cup to give the shoe some additional structure. The lockdown of the shoe with kind of that narrow midfoot is actually really good. You're not going to be shifting around in the shoe overall, though for me, with the shoe fitting a little bit tight, I did actually leave it a little bit more loose than I would normally tie my shoes to relieve some of the pressure there. However, due to a fully gusseted tongue, which has kind of those elastic bands in there, it didn't leave my shoe shifting even with the looser fit, so that could be something to take into consideration. Now, before moving on to the midsole itself, I do want to talk about the overall balance of the shoe, because sometimes when you get these max cushion shoes, because of the potential weight of the shoe, a lot of the weight is just stuck in the midsole and they leave the uppers really bare bones. What this turns into is an unbalanced shoe where it kind of feels like the midsole is constantly trying to pull you down and the upper is just hanging onto your foot, and that was not the case with the Skyward X. The Skyward X does a really good job of having weight distribution throughout the shoe, having it very balanced, which is nice overall, so you never feel like you're going to fly out of the shoe or off of the midsole and that it's kind of a detached feeling. No, in fact, it's a very kind of unified shoe. Moving to that midsole, there's a lot of interesting things going on. So kind of that top layer as well as the interior foam is a PIBA super foam. This is the foam that is typically used in racing shoes, and it's supposed to be very, very bouncy, very, very responsive. Oftentimes it gives a good amount of squish. For durability purposes, you have the supercritical EVA outer layer or kind of container, which that PIBA layer sits inside. So that's going to be a much more durable foam, and that's kind of the foam that also comes in contact with the ground at any point where there is no outsole. That does a couple of things for the shoe. One is it makes the shoe a lot more stable. In fact, one of the things with this shoe for me is it almost feels like a stability shoe. I'll talk more about other factors that could be affecting that, but simply having kind of this big piece or outer layer of supercritical EVA gives the shoe a lot more structure to begin with. The other thing that's fairly unique is there is a carbon fiber plate, but it is an H-shaped plate that runs throughout the shoe and then comes up with these winged tips. Now, my understanding from Hoka is that these wing tips give added stability to a shoe, as well as the H shape of the plate mimics the H-frame foam that is used in Hoka's stability shoes like the Stinson and the Gaviota. The orientation of the plate itself too is not a typical like spoon curve like a lot of racing shoes are, so much as it's almost bumped up here, which is what contributes as well to the pronounced arch. But really what that tells me is that this shoe is not supposed to necessarily go fast so much as be able to just kind of guide your foot along in a stable manner over miles and miles. Now, speaking of how that actually feels underfoot, for me, the shoe actually took about 30 miles to loosen up, which to me, with all of the great shoe options out there that feel amazing right out of the box, I don't like it when a shoe has that kind of break-in period, because sometimes people don't even make it to 30 miles before calling it quits. In fact, I almost did that with my review, but I had heard through some friends that it does take a while to kind of break in, so I powered through because I wanted to see. And finally, this last week, I did feel kind of that nice, smooth transition that the shoe kind of transforms into after around that 30-mile mark. For the first 30 miles, though, I'm about 170 to 175 pounds, 5'10". I tend to have a very powerful stride and weigh more than a lot of runners. And I had a really hard time condensing this foam on each stride. It felt like I was fighting the shoe in the beginning. Now that it is eased up, it feels very comfortable, it feels very smooth, it feels very cushioned for my joints, for my knees, ankles, and so I get the appeal of the shoe. Again, I don't love that it took 30 miles to get there. The other thing that there may have been kind of some preconceived assumptions or perceptions on my end where having a PIBA top or interior layer, I expected the shoe to be a lot more springy, and the shoe is not necessarily made to go fast. It's made to go long and keep you comfortable. So from a pace versatility standpoint, kind of in that easy or marathon long run pace range, it feels really good. But if you try and take it up even to kind of your tempo or threshold, I do think that the weight and the lack of kind of spring overall starts to come into play, because you really have to put a lot of force into the ground and kind of punch it in order to get that kind of rebound back. So this is not a do-it-all shoe like some of the lightweight super trainers. The max cushion super trainer category is a little bit different. It's not necessarily made for interval sessions so much as, again, just keeping you comfortable on the long run. Now, from the outsole standpoint, you have this high abrasion rubber, which the grip is really, really good on the shoes. It's the same grip that's used on the Hoka Cielo X1, which was Hoka's super shoe for this year. All in all, I ran in a lot of rain actually in these shoes. You can see that they're a little bit dirtier than most of my shoes once I review them. And again, that's because we got a lot of splashing, we got some mud, just kind of some debris from the road. And I really had no issues whatsoever, no slipping. I've never felt at risk in these shoes. Now, as far as who is this shoe for, I think that this could be kind of the everyman or stability runner's race day shoe. If you're someone who has always wanted a little bit of a pop or plate, but you haven't been able to get that because they don't make stability super shoes, then this could be kind of your solution, your entry level to that. I think it's a step up from the Hoka Bondi X, which a lot of people felt were really, really overly firm and kind of hurt their feet. I think this is the natural evolution of that shoe, where it is a max cushion super trainer, and it has comfort. It has, a little bit of kind of nice guiding feel in the foot. You just have to power through those first 30 or so miles. I think some people are going to see this shoe and think that it would be good for daily use and walking, and I don't necessarily recommend that, because anytime you have a carbon fiber plate in the shoe, it can really kind of mess with your mechanics. and it's not going to be great for daily use, so be aware of that. Other people who might like the shoe are people who take their long runs out at a much higher pace than they probably should, and they're looking for a shoe to kind of allow them to sit back and relax and feel comfortable and just ease into those miles. Once again, the shoe loosened up, I felt very, very comfortable on kind of that mid to long run distance at an easy to moderate pace. Now, from a comparison standpoint, I think the shoe that is easiest to compare this to is the New Balance Super Comp Trainer. I did not run in the Super Comp Trainer 2, but comparing it to the Super Comp Trainer 1, the Super Comp Trainer 1 was a lot squishier, a lot bouncier, and again, I think that's what I expected from the Skyward X, and it was just a different overall feel. New Balance Super Comp Trainer, and they are releasing the V3 fairly soon, will probably be wider overall, so if you don't like the narrow midfoot, if you don't like kind of the pronounced arch, you're generally not going to be getting that in the Super Comp Trainer. Continuing to kind of look at this max cushion super trainer category, we can also compare it to the Mizuno Neo Vista, and yes, that is how you say Mizuno. It is a Japanese last name. But the Neo Vista is a lot lighter overall, though it has a similar kind of narrow midfoot, and the shoe is a little bit less balanced, and so kind of like I was talking about how sometimes you feel like you're just taped to a midsole, that is a little bit of the feel that I get from the Neo Vista, especially with kind of the sock-like upper as opposed to a traditional upper. So when comparing these two shoes, if you want something a little bit lighter weight, something that maybe feels a little more comfortable at that threshold style pace, I do think the Neo Vista is going to be the move. But if you're looking for something more for those long runs where you're really trying to relax, you don't really want to get that sensation underfoot that wants to propel you forward, then certainly the Skyward X is going to be the move. The other thing to consider is the Neo Vista is not a stability shoe. It's very narrow again in that midfoot area, and so and the foam tends to be softer overall, and it squishes, so you will roll around, you shift in the shoe here, so if you want better lockdown, better stability, you're going to want to go with the Skyward X. Just some final thoughts on the Hoka Skyward X. Honestly, for me, I don't think the shoe was the greatest fit. Whether it was because of the midfoot being like overly narrow with that pronounced arch that didn't really vibe with my foot that well, and I kind of tend to like a softer overall max cushion feel. And so when I'm doing my long runs, I either want an actual super shoe that's going to propel me forward a little bit if I'm hitting some threshold or marathon paces within that run, or if I'm going just a long, easy run, then I generally don't want any stiffening agents in the shoe, and I might go with something of more of a traditional max cushion shoe where we're just going to get kind of that plush comfort overall. I do see the appeal though, and again, I do think that this shoe is going to be best served for those who are maybe stability shoe runners who want to try something with a little bit more beefed up technology, but at $225, it is a little bit of a tough sell for me overall. What's interesting to me is I really, really like the Hoka Cielo X1, which was Hoka's super shoe for this year, though I feel like this fits better in the super trainer or max cushion super trainer category overall in terms of like propelling you forward with that nice rocker. You get a little bit of pop. It's a softer overall foam. And then I felt like the Rocket X2 from last year from Hoka was like their true race day like speed shoe that you could take out and run a marathon or a half marathon or even a 5K in. And so to me, I almost feel like this shoe was not the most necessary if they had just catered this towards the super trainer category and then having the Rocket X2 as the super trainer or as the actual super shoe race day shoe. But I do understand what Hoka's going for here. I do see it overall because I don't think that every super shoe is going to be accommodating for the everyman. In fact, I think a lot of them are going to be overly aggressive. And so if you're someone who just wants to get kind of your first carbon plated shoe, who needs a little bit more stability, wants a lot of cushion, wants more structure, then the Skyward X is probably going to be very appealing to you. Now, if you stuck around to the end, I sure appreciate it. Do me a favor, and if you haven't already, hit that like button and follow button, and make sure to come back as we've got a lot of really cool reviews coming out here in the next few weeks. And lastly, I'll leave you with a question, which is, what was the first carbon fiber plated shoe that you purchased or raced in? Let me know down below. Thanks, everybody.